Hello everyone, Miss Carrie here. Today we're celebrating STAMPtember with Simon Says Stamp and This Calls for Confetti. I'm going to show you how to make a playful Halloween card featuring Bigfoot. I'll share lots of beginner-friendly tips for ink blending, stenciling, stamping, and adding dimension. I'm going to be working with the exclusive stamp set from This Calls for Confetti. This stamp set features our beloved This Calls for Confetti Bigfoot, some bats, a tree, and of course a candy bucket. There's also some fun sentiments like trick or treat, smell my feet, Yeti or not, it's Halloween, I'm here for the candy, and some larger sentiments like beware and humans. Before we get started with the project, I want to let you know that this is an exclusive stamp and die set made just for STAMPtember with Simon Says Stamps. This exclusive Smell My Feet collection is only available during this time, and there is a limited quantity available. If you love this collection as much as I do, make sure that you snag it before it disappears. I will add a link to this collection down in the description below. Let's take a look at all of the supplies we're going to need to create today's card. I'm going to be using the Halloween Scene Builder stencils from This Calls for Confetti. These feature some different images that you might want to use to build a Halloween background. There are some bats, moon, a tree, and this little graveyard scene. They're all super fun and easy to use. For the card base, I'm using a black A2 size. Over the top of this, I have a white background panel that's been cut a little bit smaller. I've also grabbed some cardstock to create a stenciled moon. This needs to be at least 4.5 by 4.5. To stamp my Bigfoot, I have some light gray cardstock. And I also have a couple of pieces of white cardstock that I'm going to use for the rest of the stamped images. These are some very basic supplies that you probably already have in your collection. As always, I will bring in some additional items as I create the project. I always encourage you to use what you already have in your craft stash, but if you would like a list of the items I'm using, one has been posted down in the description below, along with my affiliate link to the This Calls for Confetti shop. All right, we're going to start with the ink blending first because that's going to take a moment to set before we can assemble the card. I have a piece of mixed media cardstock that's been cut at 4 by 5.25 inches. I'm going to be shading this in a deep purple to create a nighttime sky. With a blending brush, I'm going to add the Dusty Concord ink. I am focusing more of the color around the edges and leaving the center a little bit lighter. If you would like, you could also bring in some blue or black to deepen the colors. I wanted this to have more of a whimsical feel, so I'm using bright Halloween hues. Now, as you can see, I did not add color to the lower part of this. I will be bringing in a separate piece of cardstock that I'll use to create a green grassy hill. If you don't want to add extra layers to your card, you could bring in this graveyard scene stencil and do your inking over the top of this. I like adding layers, so I'm going to do this in 2 separate pieces. Around the edges, I'm going to add some hickory smoke. This is going to deepen those edges and create more of that glow-like look. Don't worry if it looks messy at first. Ink blending always smooths out as it dries. I use Distress Oxides because it's always fun to add a little bit of water to create some texture. I'm going to spatter some over the top, and you'll see how the ink changes as it reacts with the water. So that was a really simple background. I'm going to set this aside to dry, and I'm going to create that layer for the hill. Like I said, you could have used that graveyard stencil if you like, but I wanted to bring in a nice bright green and add some extra layers to the card. I'm using Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide ink. This is a nice bold green that's going to go well with the bright purple. To deepen this a bit, I'm going to blend some hickory smoke over the top of it. You're going to see how this darkens that green and gives it more of that nighttime feel. The last thing I'm going to do with this is add a little bit of spatter. Instead of water, I'm going to bring in some watered down acrylic paint. Adding this white spatter is going to give it the look of little fireflies. It's really easy to do. All right, I'm going to set this aside to dry, and we're going to finish our last item here. This is going to be the large moon that's going to take up most of our background. I'm going to use a circle stencil from the Halloween Scene Builder set. This is a great collection of stencils for those of you who like to create backgrounds for your cards. I'm going to place my circle stencil in the center here and secure it in place. I'm going to blend some scattered straw Distress Oxide ink around the edges. As I do this, I'm leaving the center lighter. This is going to give it that look of a beautiful harvest moon. Now I chose more of a yellow color, but you could also bring in some grays, a red, a pink, or even some soft ice blue. All right, I'm going to bring in the next stencil and I'm going to layer it over the top. I'm just going to secure it in place real quick, and then I'm going to bring in some pumice stone ink and blend this gray over those shapes. I'm going to concentrate most of the color around the edges, and then I'm going to lighten my touch as I go towards the center of the moon so that I create that glowing feel. Now that I have all of these shapes in place, I'm going to remove this stencil, and then I'm going to bring my scattered straw in and go over the top of this. It's going to soften that gray a bit and create a hazy look. It's also going to deepen the color around the edges. With a light touch, I'm going to add just a little bit of yellow in the center here. And now we have a beautiful harvest moon. So once I remove the stencil, you'll be able to see how beautiful this looks. Now you could have done this right onto the background, but I'm going to use a circle die and cut this out real quick. To finish this moon, I'm going to add some bats with black texture paste. I'm using a black opaque texture paste. I'm just going to mix it right here on the stencil to make sure that I don't have any lumps. And then I'm going to run this over the bat design of the stencil. I chose to use texture paste because I wanted to add a little bit of dimension to my card. You don't have to use paste. You can use ink instead. Now when I'm doing detailed stencils like this, I like to give the paste a minute to set before I remove the stencil. This creates almost a skin over the top and sets the paste in all of those detailed areas. After about 30 seconds, I can lift the stencil, and you can see how beautiful those bats look. All right, I'm going to set this with the other pieces of the background. As those all dry and set, we're going to stamp the images we need for the card. I'm going to start with the two Bigfoot images. Now, whenever you're cutting out stamped images with dies, you usually get this white outline, like I have here on the pumpkin buckets. I didn't want that for the two Bigfoot images, so I am going to stamp a tone on tone so that I have a darker gray image and a soft brown color around the edge. I am using a stamping platform. It's much easier to get a solid ink impression when I can stamp it multiple times. After stamping it the first time, you can see that there are some little parts and pieces that didn't get covered. You could leave it like this if you wanted to and make the Bigfoot look like it's got some multicolor fur. I'm going to stamp it a second time because I want it to have a nice solid color. All right, now that the first one's done, I'm going to go ahead and stamp the second one real quick. The next item I'm going to stamp is the sentiment. I'm using the Trick or Treat Smell My Feet sentiment because I think it's going to be perfect for this card. All right, the last item I need to stamp are the two pumpkin buckets. I'm going to be stamping these with spiced marmalade ink. The combination of the orange, bright purple, green, and yellow are perfect for Halloween. Now, I always like to show you how you can level up on your techniques when you're stamping or die cutting your images. Today, I'm going to show you how we create a dual-toned image with these little candy buckets. I first stamped it in the bright orange, and now I'm going to create a black handle. I'm just going to bring over a little bit of black ink and use a fine brush to add that ink to the top part of the bucket. You could do this with masking, but it's much easier to do with a small detailed blending brush. Now you might have to do this a few times depending on how dark you want that handle. You can also add a little bit of ink around the edges of the bucket to give it more of an aged look. I picture these two little Bigfoot children running through the forest, and I'm sure they have dropped their candy bucket in the dirt a few times. So they're probably coated with dirt and filled with candy. Now that we've added that black ink, you can see what a difference it makes between just a simple orange stamped image versus adding the little bit of details with black. It's a very simple technique that can be used to level up your stamped images. I'm going to go ahead and stamp the second one real quick. Now I chose to use orange because I felt like it went well with all of the other colors I'm using. Of course, there are so many different colors of pumpkin buckets out there. You could stamp these in any color. One of the things that I do love about the pumpkin buckets is the fact that there are some special buckets that are designed just for nonverbal children. I don't know if you knew this, but teal pumpkin buckets can be used during Halloween as a signal to you for those children who may not be able to speak for themselves. This is a really thoughtful way to make trick-or-treating more inclusive, and I really love that. All right, now that all of my images are stamped, I'm going to go off camera and cut these all out with the matching dies, and then I'm going to show you how to put the card together. I'm going to start by building the background. Like I said, you could have used that graveyard stencil to create the base, but instead I've used this second piece that I'm going to cut into a little hill shape with my scissors. This is just going to add a little bit of dimension to the card. I'm going to temporarily set the moon on the card just so that I can judge where this hill needs to set, and then I'll glue it in place. Once that's down, I'm going to glue this entire card panel onto the black card base. This is just a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of black cardstock. I'll be placing this onto a card once I'm done. I do want the moon to lift off the card just a little bit, so I've added some 1mm foam tape to the back of it. You could also create a little window card by cutting a circle and adding your moon behind it and bringing in some little shaker bits. All right, so our background's complete. Let's go ahead and grab all of our die cut pieces. You probably are wondering why there's more pieces here than I originally stamped. When I'm creating layered cards, I like to cut multiple die cuts. When you glue them together, you give them more stability. Layering multiple die cuts together also creates a chipboard-like look, and it saves you from having to use as much foam tape. So let me show you what I mean. I cut an additional layer of these, and when I glue them together, you can see that it's a little bit thicker. Like I said, it almost looks like chipboard. I'm going to do the same with the pumpkin buckets. I cut an additional layer of these, and when I glue them together, you can see that it's a little bit thicker. I did this with both of the pumpkin buckets so that I could create some dimension on my card and make these stand out a little bit more. For the sentiment, I cut out 3 additional layers. I'm going to glue these together real quick with some liquid adhesive. I prefer to use liquid adhesive because it gives me a little bit of time to line all of the pieces up before it sets. I'm just going to quickly adhere these layers together, and then I'm going to show you the difference between the 4 layers and the 2 layers that I created on the pumpkin. So let me bring these up to the camera. You can see that the sentiment looks almost like a piece of chipboard. And I'm not going to have to use any foam tape with this. Now all the layers are together. All we have to do is adhere them to the card. I am adding foam tape to the back of the 2 little Bigfoot children. I want them to stand up over the top of the card. Now that these are in place, I'm going to bring in the little pumpkin buckets. Now with these little pumpkin buckets, you could either slide the handle underneath the hands or you could place them over the top. I'm just going to put a little bit of adhesive on the back and use my tweezers to help me put them in place. Now I made these pumpkin buckets the same color, but if you wanted to just make different colors of pumpkin buckets, you could surely do that. All right, the last thing we're going to do is bring in that sentiment. Because I layered all of those die cuts together, I don't need to add any foam tape to have it pop up off the card. I'm just going to add a little bit of glue on the back and pop it right here on the moon. There we go. The Smell My Feet stamp set does also come with some little bats, and you can see that it adds just another level of dimension. And there you have it. This has a whimsical look with bright Halloween colors. And you can almost picture those 2 little children running through the forest collecting their pails of candy. Today's card making project was a simple one, but you learned a lot of new techniques. I shared a way to create an ink blended Halloween sky, stamp tone on tone for a no outline look, and add dimension with layered die cuts. I want to thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this project, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share it with your crafty friends. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see what you create.